Traveling changes a man, you know. For better or worse, you could say.
All right, everybody, how y'all doing out there? This is Zach Sutherland, and I'm here with my good podcasting friend Tyler, and we are here tonight to talk to you again about the wonderful world of traveling internationally and getting outside of a comfortable zone, what that does to you whenever you're traveling. And, you know, a lot of people will go travel, they'll go to Europe, Western Europe, and those are cool. Don't get me wrong. I love, when I first went there, I was in Western Europe, but I really found the most memorable times was when I was in some weird Eastern European place.
Are you saying Eastern Europe is a weird place, man?
Well, it can be.
Yeah.
But I had some kind of crazy experience where I wasn't sure what was going to happen next.
Right.
It was kind of spontaneous. I remember the Russians, you know, that I always talked to, they were so crazy and spontaneous and willing to do anything. Maybe that was because they grew up under this communist, fascist regime for so long. It makes them that way. I don't know. But all I know is that crazy times were the good times. And so that leads me to...
And always with Russians. The crazy Russians.
Yeah. And I feel like you have that so many... Oftentimes, like if someone talks about their experience in Russia, it's like, oh man, dude.
They always have a story.
Bert Kreischer's
yeah,
story about the Yamashinu, you know.
Well, Russian. Anybody that goes to Russia comes back with a story. That is for sure. Or hangs out with the Russians comes out with a story. They're such colorful characters. I mean, I'm not really one to stereotype in general, but there are distinctions in different cultures, and my experience with anywhere east of Berlin, there's always some characters. You know, you always meet some kind of fascinating characters that you just can't find down the street at your local Walmart. Well, actually, at your local Walmart, you're going to find some pretty interesting people too, but on a different level, I would say. But I don't know. Was there a question to lead into on this, or are we just talking about?
Well.
Because we didn't really. By the way, out there, we really didn't plan this. This was completely spontaneous this time. So we don't want to ramble too much, but I kind of like the spontaneity of it. But I was wondering, is there a specific topic? I like this idea of danger, and I like this idea of discomfort.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about it earlier. And it goes along with what Jordan Peterson said one time about when you feel most alive, and whenever spectators are watching some daredevil, you know, they're right there on the edge of like danger, pushing yourself to the limit, pushing yourself over. Yeah. But that's what most makes it interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the theme that I was thinking about, and I wanted to turn it over to Tyler because I know you must have some stories of when you're very uncomfortable, an uncomfortable situation turned into a more comfortable situation, or just
something that happens along the way that puts you in an uncomfortable spot. Wow, yeah, Actually, yes. There's tons of stories, but the first one that popped in my head is a story that I never have really liked to tell, and because it's an embarrassing story. Oh, it's not. I don't know if it's embarrassing. It's not even really embarrassing. It's just really not really how I see myself. It's not really a part of my character that I see myself as. But it's the first one that popped in my head, and I never really talk about it. So here's a great chance to talk about it in the public, you know, so everybody can hear it. When I was in Istanbul, I went out one night, and I was young, you know, I was in my early 20s, and I didn't know anything about Istanbul, and there was a guy walking next to me, and he had on this really debonair look about him. He had on this suit, and he had this sort of salt and pepper hair, and he just looked really refined. And he started walking next to me, and he goes, "Excuse me, you have time? And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I gave him the time or whatever, And he's like, do you want to go where there's girls in the city? Do you want to go where there's girls? And by the way, we started off this talking about Russians. This guy happened to be a Russian, so that's something I had forgotten about.
But it was in Turkey.
He was in Turkey. I was in Istanbul. Yeah, and so I was young. I said, sure. I was like, yeah. Where's the girls? You know, like I want to meet girls. And he said, come with me. And I walked with him, and we went to this bar, and I was, going back to an earlier conversation we had, I always, from the very beginning, I said, I'm when I go out and do this traveling experience, when I go out and do stuff, I'm just going to go, I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to have some limits to what I'll do or not do, but I'm just going to follow whatever's happening because it has always been an interesting experience when I did it. So I went with him and I followed him. He's like, he told me, I'm from Russia, and we talked for a bit and whatnot. And we got to this place. I went in and I'm sitting there at this table, and I see all these girls up on the stage, and I started to realize that he took me to a strip club. And I thought he was going to take me to a bar where there's girls, so I was like, it's like, well, this is a bar and there are girls here, so but I was like, let me ride this out. I just want to see I just want to see it for what it is, because you have to remember, like, I was young, and I was sort of like, it was my first, I was early in my exposure to other parts of the world, and if I had done this now, I probably would have never ended up in that place, and I would have never stayed if I had. But I wanted to just see to what extent am I in this situation? What is this situation? And obviously it was a strip bar, but why did he bring me here and all that? So this girl came over and she sat next to me, and she started talking to me, and I was like, I was entertaining her, and it feels good in your ego to have she was a Ukrainian girl. She was a beautiful Ukrainian, and she started talking to me, and she said, can I order some champagne? And I said, sure. And I ordered her some champagne, and then she ordered another champagne. And finally I was like, I don't really want to do this anymore. I was like, I want to go. I want to leave. I think she propositioned me. I think that she propositioned me, and like, let's go in the back room. And I was like, well, what? It's like, does that cost money? She goes, I think she gave me some number or something like that. And I was like, I'm not going to do this. So I went to leave, and I went to pay, and they brought me the bill. And this was like, I think the bill was like equivalent of about $200, more than that. I think it must have been more, because maybe I don't know, it was several $100 at least. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I said, I'm not paying this I was pretty feisty back then, and I was like, I'm not paying this bullshit. And I bought her two little glasses of champagne, or 2 bottles of champagne, or it was like small, like cheap champagne. And the guy that had wanted the bill, like, pulled the menu out and said, here's the prices on the menu. And of course the prices were literally written on the menu as being that expensive. And I said, like, of course in that moment I realized this was a damn scam. It was like a scam they had set up. And I was like, kiss my ass. I was like, I was like fighting back. And I went to leave, and I went to walk out, and there were all these dudes, like, in these, like, they were like basically mafia. They were in these suits, and they were freaking huge. They were all these guys, Russians, Turkish. There were a bunch of them. There's like 7 of them at the door, and they said, you come with me, like that. And I was like, I can't really fight these guys off. I'm pretty feisty. I've never backed down, but there was no way out of this. Yeah. And so I got pulled into the back, and there was this Jabba the Hutt character, and I'm not even exaggerating. He was this blobby dude with this mustache and dark skin. I think he was Turkish, or he could have been, I'm not sure where he was from. I have no idea. It could have been Bulgarian. I have no idea. But he was this blob of a human being, and he just was this something about him was so dark and disturbing. And he was sitting behind one of those like old classical analog calculator machines that you punch in the numbers and it prints out the receipt. He's like, and he's just sitting there punching on these numbers. He's like, and it was like from a movie, dude. It was like you could not have painted more of a group of characters from a movie, from some gangster movie, better. Like it was as iconic as it could possibly. Smoky, dark, surrounded by. And I remember there was one guy that was about my age. He was one of the little thugs, and he was so cocky and so excited. It was like I was like his first kill. It was like he had this like kind of like grin, this like duper's delight on his face. He was just so excited about having got his scam working on somebody. And I don't remember the conversation, but it was pretty clear that they were serious. Like I needed to pay them. Like it was serious. Like it was like, if you don't pay, I now looking back on it, I've been in other scary situations, and I had been pretty conditioned to Eastern Europe by that point, and I've gotten myself out of hairier situations just by knowing like that they're not always as tough as they seem. But in that moment, the threat seemed really real. And I was in Turkey. I was in Istanbul. Nobody knew where I was, and I didn't even know where I was. I didn't even know where I was. It was some little like seedy back alley in the middle of Istanbul, and these guys were players. Like they were for it was real. It was real mafia. And so I was like, they were like, we're going to take you to the bankomat and you're going to get us the money. And I've been scammed, and I figured it's not worth it to get myself in any more of a situation, because they might not kill me, but they could certainly beat me within inches of my life, or if they wanted to, they could do whatever they wanted and just leave me there. So I went and I got the money out and I gave it to them, and I left, and so I was safe. I was fine. And I went back, and of course I read that this was a common thing back then. I think it probably still is. It was a common trick, and it was so stupid to have fallen for it. I should have known. I mean, again, it goes back to this idea of when you go into the adventure and you plan to say no, to not say no, not meaning like you're going to do anything, but when you plan to say, I'm going to go down whatever path is presented to me, sometimes you're going to end up in some amazing places. I mean, you really will, like, because there's always a other side of the coin to this. And then sometimes you're going to end up into some dark, scary places. And this particular one, I wanted to see where it would take me, and it took me straight to the dragon's lair. And I'm more embarrassed by having been fooled by such an obvious trick based on my own. It wasn't naivete. It was more like I want to see what it looks like on the other side. I want to see it. I want to see the abyss. I want to see the stars. I want to see it. I want to be exposed to all that it has to offer. And so I don't really feel stupid. I'm embarrassed that I didn't act on my gut, even though my gut was telling me from the beginning not to do it. I do remember that was and I think that was the thing that hit me the hardest, was like, this was a thing. It was like a thing that was happening to a lot of people at the time. And I think other people got screwed worse than I did. They have another trick they'll do, which they'll get an actual woman will be the hook instead of the guy going around recruiting the marks, or however you want to say it, targets. And so the woman, this is the one that's, and I think in Hungary it was a big deal. It was different parts of Eastern Europe during this time was a big deal. That this beautiful woman will show up, get you interested, and give you all this attention. Next thing you know, you're at another bar. She takes you to another bar, and that bar is one of those bars that is there to fool people. And so mine was more obvious, and so I didn't get too far into the scam before I decided to leave. So it wasn't too bad, but that is one of those situations that I don't even like talking about it, because it's probably one of my more like stories that I'm just not really happy about. But it is. I think out of all the ones that I knew I was in a hairy situation and I learned something from it, was that one. I think that's the first one that came to my head.
Okay. So that's a uncomfortable situation where you kind of risked it, and it turned out to be not a positive thing in the end. But however, you are wiser because of it.
You're wiser beyond reading it in a book. I experienced it. I saw, and when you do things like that, you also you have a chance to experience the kinds of characters. And I'm a storyteller. I'm just as much fascinated by that Jabba the Hutt character as I am like that. To me, at least, I came away with that. You know, I'm like yeah, I had to pay the price, but I got to meet the Jabba the Hutt. You know, I got to see that guy. He is real. That guy was real. He was sitting on the other side of the desk, speaking into the other guys in probably, I don't know if it was Turkish. I don't remember because I didn't even know what some of these languages sounded like at the time. But I met that guy, and I met the little punky Brewster guy that was so excited. Like that's a character in a movie right there. And so the wisdom that came from it was informed me about how to recognize how to see people, you know, how to see what's possible, what evil. Like you get a chance to see what is people being evil. You get a chance to see that.
That's also important to talk about the times when things didn't go your way.
Yeah.
In life and traveling, especially since you're traveling, you know, every country you go to is in some way a risk.
Yeah.
You know, and in a related story about that, when I was in China 4 years ago, I was considering whether or not to take a summer holiday to the Philippines. And there was a guy that we worked with that told us, don't go go to the Philippines. Look up this part of the Philippines. Don't go there. But I knew somebody who got macheted. Ooh. You know, there are people, there are really bad people down there. Don't go there. Yeah. Look at the website. Look at the U.S. Embassy. What they say about that. Right. And so I went down that rabbit hole, and I did want to, okay, he's telling me that I should be aware of certain things. So I did. Yeah. I went down it, and then I started reading stuff on the internet, and a lot of it was kind of bad, but in certain regions, like in the South, you don't want to go in the South of the Philippines. Yeah. That's the bad part. But at the same time, if I had just really only listened to him, you know, only listened to these kind of scary stories from the Philippines, then I wouldn't have gone, or I would have been very maybe I'll opt for a safer place like South Korea or something like that. But then I wouldn't have gone and had an amazing time in the Philippines, because I did end up going to the Philippines with a friend of mine, and at some point during my trip I did travel with him a lot, but then at one point we split our ways, and I was really on my own. And I had to still be open to the possibility that there are people out there who may rob you, there are people who will swindle you or trick you or do whatever, but it's a risk that you have to take, because there's a reward. And the reward is just experiencing a different place where you've never been before. So anyway, that's sort of and
it makes you tougher too. You know, this kind of I just was, while you were saying that, I was sort of letting some of the things you said to me about the wisdom marinate in my own story, because I hadn't really thought about that story. And as we were saying earlier, this is spontaneous. I didn't even know that I was going to be talking about that, which is, I think, a really great format for our conversations, to not know, and then just whatever comes up in your head, you just say it. And that was what came up in my head. But I was just thinking about it after that. I was tougher. I was not only tougher, I knew how to help others. I knew what to look for. Some guy tried to rob me on a train between Slovakia and Czech Republic one time, and I caught him. And I knew, because I had been robbed before, I had been scammed. I knew what was going on, and the guy that was trying to rob me, he broke into my cabin and was pulling my wallet out of my pocket, and I caught him in the time that he was doing it. And then he went out, and my heart was beating, and I just was like, what in the world just happened? I turned the light on, and I noticed, after a minute or two, he was going back and forth through the cart still. He was not deterred at all by the fact that I had caught him. He was going to the next cabin and robbing them right in front of my eyes. And I just sat there for a second. I mean, it took me a minute to kind of gather myself. And by the time I had gathered myself, he had moved on. But I had that fire in me. And I don't tolerate injustice. I have let me put it that way. I have a really strong sense of justice, and it's just like I don't care if it's me or if it's somebody else. Once that trigger is hit, you can be 10 feet tall and I'm still coming after you. I just don't, it overrides me. And so I just got up and I went next door and I woke up the people next door and I said, hey, check your wallets. I just got robbed. And they all checked their wallets, and sure enough, they had been robbed. And one guy was pretty upset about it, and he was an American. And I said, I know who did it. Do you want to go get him? And he was a little bit scared, but I think he kind of was feeding off of my energy, and he was like, yeah, okay. And I was like, well, let's go. And I was like, because they're still on here, they're still on the train. And I hunted them down, man. Like I was like just storming through the train. You know, it's like narrow little train passages in Eastern Europe, and there, sure enough, there they were, another cart ahead. This is in the middle of the night, and they were like robbing somebody else, and they had just coming out. They were just coming out, and there was a bunch of them. It was a group of them. They were Roma, which, if anybody out there doesn't know what I'm talking about, the Roma people are a group of people that are notorious for this, like, sort of, they're travelers. They say gypsy, but this is kind of a derogatory term. But it's a group of people that originated in India that are throughout Europe, especially in Eastern Europe. And this is another conversation, which I love talking about Roma people, because there's some great things to say about them as well. But they have a bad reputation for thievery, and it's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate stereotype, because it's not true of all the Roma people. But they were in the middle of the aisle, and I said, "Hey, you," and I started speaking in Czech. And I was telling him I'm going to call the police, and I started just like pointing my finger. I was like coming right at him, and the American guy was behind me, and I could tell he was scared. And I went right after those guys, because I know how Eastern Europeans are. They're either willing to go at it and fight you, or they don't have the courage to do it. And so these guys didn't want to fight. They kind of like were like, okay, and they started reaching in their pockets and started pulling out these wads of dollar bills, like American dollars, like they just had handfuls of money. And all I did was say, I'm coming after you. I said, I'm coming to get you. And it scared them, and they pulled the stuff out. And I was like, and I turned to the guy behind me and I said, get your money. I was like, get it, dude. It's like, and he was like, I don't really care about the money. I just want my credit cards back. And I was like, dude, they're giving, like, they probably got $300 right here in their hands. Who cares? Like, just take it. You know? Like, so it's the thin blue line right there. I was like, hey, just take it, man. Just take the money, you know. And it's like cops are corrupt, you know. It's like, hey, get the money, you know. But I was just trying to, like, dude, like, don't let them take advantage of you. What are you talking about? You want to give them the money? And I was like, what the hell's wrong with you, man? And he's like, I just want my credit cards. And I said to the Roma guys, I said, like, in Czech, I was like, because they obviously didn't speak English. And I was like, where's his wallet? Like, where's his credit cards? And they said they pointed to the bathroom. They said, it's in the bathroom. And I was like, I don't know about that. And I was like, Tom, it's there. It's in the bathroom. And I was like, dude, all right, so you go. And I'm going to, because I didn't want to turn my back on him, because I'm in this narrow train. And I was like, you go. And he's like, no, you go. This thief is like, no, you go. And I said, no, you go. He's like, no, you go. And up to that point, they didn't want to fight me. But when I would not turn my back to them, and I wanted them to turn their back to me, we had a standoff. And then they started, like, getting aggressive, and they started wanting to fight. And I remember what they did. I don't remember, they didn't pull a knife or anything, but they started bowling up. They were like, okay, this is our breaking point. And I was like, all right. I said, I'm not getting stabbed over a guy that doesn't want damn money. He wants his stupid credit cards. You know, nothing against that guy. I mean, but I was just like, it's not worth it for me to get stabbed. So I said, okay, I'll go. But I didn't turn my back. I walked backwards, and I told the guy was behind me. It's like narrow. These little narrow things. You don't have room to do much. Yeah. And so we walked back, and sure enough, they had thrown all the wallets that they had stolen in the trash can in the bathroom. Yeah, and I was like, do you see your wallet? And he said, yeah. He said, this is my wallet. He pulled it out and got his credit cards. Wow. And then the guys left, and we went back. And I was like, the guy was like, I could tell he was shaken up. He was shaking really bad, and I wasn't. Like, I was not shaken. I was like, because I had been in Eastern Europe for so long, and I had seen so much of this stuff, and I knew the lanes to be in with it. Yeah. And I think that's the point. But I just want to end this story real quick, because this is an important conclusion. That little passage between, and this is for any travelers out there, I don't know, this was years ago, but there's a little section between Czech Republic and Slovakia, or was it Slovakia and Hungary? I think it's Czech Republic and Slovakia, where there is no security on the trains, and because it's a different country, so the Czechs get off before it goes into Slovakia, and then the Slovak security gets on. And that little window is when those thieves get on and rob people. They got a little racket going. And I said that the cops got on, the security got on, and I told them the story, and they're like, you thought the boy problem is your problem. Like they didn't give a shit. They just didn't care. They didn't, and that's the reason why those guys felt they had the runway to rob the next people after they got caught, because that is the complacency of post-communist Eastern Europe, is the complacency of don't stick your head out, because if you stick your head out, like our ancestors did, it gets chopped off. So it's better to look the other way while other people are being taken advantage of. Yeah. And that's one of the things I learned about it. But I'm sorry, I know I'm going on for a bit, but I just wanted to say that because if I had not had some of these edgier experiences in the past in which I threw myself into the environment and got confronted with the environment, I probably would have been like that guy, and I would have been scared enough to not do anything. But because I knew it, I knew the territory, I knew what the dragon looked like, I knew where my strength was, and I knew what to do. And so in that case, there are times where those discomforts, those horrors, those difficulties, they make you tougher, they make you smarter, and put you in a position in which you can help others.
Yeah, and I'm totally glad that you brought up the second story. They were both kind of related to each other. Initially, whenever I asked you that question, like whenever you go into an unfamiliar situation, it can be really bad, but you can always learn something from that. And I think I can see how you definitely learned something the first time from being, essentially having your stuff stolen. Yeah. To the second part where you were, because you had been there for a while, you kind of knew like what was going to happen, and you were willing to stand up against this injustice, probably because it happened to you before, right?
Could be, yeah.
Yeah. So
I think that's just inside me, but I think that definitely influenced me for sure.
Yeah, and I guess how it relates to traveling, in almost any situation where you go traveling, it could be your very first time and you're just going to like Paris, France. You've always wanted to see the Eiffel Tower. That all the way to, I'm going to Kazakhstan and I'm here, I'm thirsty for the crazy experiences.
Yes.
Or I'm going to Russia, Moscow by myself.
Or North Korea and gonna steal a painting of the...
It could be a wide spectrum of that uncomfortable, unsafe space, like I said before.
Unsafe space, I like that.
But those type of things, that's what we need more of, unsafe spaces in a lot of different ways. Because it's through those experiences that you felt like a different person. You felt like
gives you depth.
It gives you depth, and you grow from it. Now, I'm not saying, like, on the other hand, I'm not saying be reckless.
Right, you don't want to be reckless. There is another side to that, and I think we're getting close to the end of the podcast, and then in the next one we'll talk more about your experiences, and maybe we can kind of lean into some of this a little bit as well with yours. But as a kind of sort of headed towards the end of this one, I think you're right. Like there is a difference. There is a line of being a smart traveler and being a reckless traveler and putting yourself into risky situations, but knowing your limits in those situations. I guess when you're young as well, you feel a little bit more invincible, and now that I see how the world can be, I don't think I would put myself into some of those situations again. But being a smart traveler is just as important. But I think there is a difference between being a tourist and being a smart traveler. I mean, the tourist gets the safe package, and we've talked about that a little bit before, and you don't necessarily get the authentic experience. If you're the kind of traveler that's like, I'm going to go to, like you said, I'm going to go to Kazakhstan, I'm going to go to Azerbaijan. I mean, wherever you go, like you could be risking it all. You could be, if you're one of those kind of people that's like, I'm just going to go into the heart of darkness, you better be prepared for what that means, because there's been plenty of people that lost their lives because they did that. So it's not, you have to be smart. You have to understand what you're going into. You can't go and steal the dictator's painting in North Korea. You can't do things like that. But to put yourself into a situation where you don't have to light yourself on fire to see if you can make it across the room. You can see what the fire looks like without getting too close to it as well.
Traveling changes a man, you know. For better or worse, who could say? But when I die, don't you tell them I went out this way. Tell them I said something. Yeah, tell them I said something great.